Good evening. Hope everybody's doing good tonight. This is my presentation over inclusive leadership. I am John Menifee. When I started this research project and started trying to develop a video and a presentation for this, I struggled at first to find two resources that I thought were really good. It took me a while, but I finally found two that I thought discussed the merits of inclusive leadership and, more importantly, discussed how we can use inclusive leadership in the school and education setting. The first of those articles came from the Stanford Social Innovation Review and was written by Molly Brennan. She outlined what I thought were 5 incredible steps to promoting inclusive leadership, and they're things that I believe not only apply to schools, but also apply to business and industry. I work in the agricultural field as well, and I think they're things that even grain elevators and other ag marketing firms could use. The first one of those steps is to customize your vision and strategy. Make it unique and make it your own. The second step was to focus on impact and metrics. Focus on things that you can measure, things that are quantifiable, and things that truly make an impact, in our case in the education field. The third step was to focus on the recruiting and selection practices. I think we all know in education, we maybe don't do the best job of going out and recruiting the best teachers for our schools and for our community. And that's something that if we want to continue to improve, is something we need to start focusing on. The fourth step was to invest in leadership development to retain high performers. Obviously in Kansas, leadership development and education are kind of touchy subjects right now simply from a financial standpoint and the budget that the state has given us to work with, and it's making it harder to give teachers those quality development opportunities so that we can retain them and keep them from crossing the state line where I live at and going and teaching in Missouri. And then the fifth step she had was to prompt ongoing discussion. It's very important if we're going to continue to develop inclusive leadership styles that we continue to have open and honest discussions about what that means, what is included in the all-inclusive part. And that's some of the things that we're going to look at as we go through this presentation. My second article was actually published to our neighbors in the north from Canada at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education of the University of Toronto. And it was published by a gentleman by the name of James Ryan. And I thought he brought up some very good points that I'll hit again at the end of this presentation when I discuss the challenges in inclusive leadership. But he recognized how hard it was to use inclusion in an already existing system. If we were going out creating a new business from scratch, or if we were starting a new company or corporation, it would be a lot easier to use these inclusion tactics. However, since we already work in the educational field, it's established. It's going to be hard to change those things, and he outlines that. And he looked at it from a society as a whole and said that in our existing system, we favor and more or less cater to the middle class, males, whites, and the heterosexual. And that's something that he stressed if we're going to overcome that, we need to model that inclusion for our students and community. We shouldn't wait for them to model it for us or to encourage us to take action. We should be the leaders. And the quote that probably impacted me the most from his entire article was that if we are genuinely interested in making the world a better place for humanity, then we can begin by putting inclusive leadership into practice in our schools. And I'm going to hopefully remember to hit on that again a little bit later as we go through the 5 steps. The 5 steps that are tied to the successful implementation, from my perspective, which I'm going to approach this as someone who wants to go into educational administration. And I thought that going through the book and looking at these 5 steps and doing more research online, I felt like it was very beneficial. I felt like I pulled a lot out of it. And I think the one that they mentioned first is model the way. And there was a quote in there, titles are granted, but it's your behavior that earns you respect. For whatever reason, when I read that quote, the first thing that popped into my mind were the royal families of England and the Netherlands and Germany and other older countries, more established countries than ours, where they still do recognize royal families. And those are titles that they were given. They're things that they inherited, but they don't truly tell you who they are. Your behavior or their behavior earns them the respect of the people. We don't have to be history majors or study history very long to know that the people of England overthrew their royal family so that they could establish a loose form of democracy. And yet the royal family now is held in high esteem there and is something that when there's a wedding or a birth in the royal family now, the people over there rejoice and it turns into a huge celebration. And that's because they've earned the respect of the people. Now, obviously, that's in a little different capacity because they are not the ruling class anymore. But I still think it hits home the fact that the title of queen or king or prince is granted. But the royal family of England's earned back the respect through their behavior. And I think from an education standpoint, that's still very important. You are granted or have been given the title of principal, superintendent, curriculum director. But in order to earn the respect of your staff, you have to show them that you value diversity. And I think a good goal for all administrators is to make sure your staff, the people that work for you, are more diverse than the student body. I have the fortune, I guess, to teach in my hometown of Paola and work at the high school there. And, we quite frankly aren't the most diverse staff in the world, but yet I look at it and we've got all sorts of diversity in terms of age, in terms of sexual preference, in terms of gender. No, we don't have a lot of diversity in terms of ethnicity or culture. We do have more of that at the middle school and elementary levels. But if we want our student body to value diversity and to value inclusion, we need to model that for them and show them that we as a staff also value it. And then you also need to treat all ethnicities, genders, sexual orientations, and cultures with the same amount of respect. Respect is something that, unfortunately, not all kids are raised with anymore, but it's something that in order to receive it, you have to give it. It's something very important to keep in mind as a future administrator. Inspire a shared vision was the second step in the book, and every grand idea, every successful endeavor, no matter what it was, started as a dream. The Wright brothers' dream to fly started as a dream. They didn't have the know-how when they started, but they developed the science, the math, and the engineering behind it to make a plane. And we need to allow our staff, or your staff, to share in this dream of our schools. They will all come with different dreams based on their cultural backgrounds. We need to listen to them, hear them, and then encourage our staff to collaborate on their dreams. And I think more importantly, as administrators, we need to be willing to share our dreams with our staff. We oftentimes, or I shouldn't say oftentimes, administrators now oftentimes come across as being very demanding and commanding. That's not a way to build dreams or inspire a vision. The quote that hit me the most out of the book was, "You can't command commitment. You have to inspire it." Challenge the process. Failure's good. We oftentimes talk in sports about, you're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That's vital for us as well if we want to be good leaders and model inclusion. Change is vital for greatness to be achieved. If we want to stick with the status quo, we can keep doing what we're doing. But to get something you've never had, you must do something you've never done. Inclusive leadership will require a great deal of change for some schools. Could result in backfire, conflict, parent complaints. But we have to be willing to have the backbone to stick with it and trust in the system. Because as the book said, when you take risks, mistakes and failure are inevitable. We will all fail as administrators. It's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. And enable others to act. To me, this was perhaps the greatest example of the 5 that demonstrate servant leadership, which is my favorite leadership type or leadership style. And focusing on serving the needs of others and not one's own builds trust in a leader. In educational administration, the ones we should be serving first are the students. They need to see diversity in the staff. They need to see that we truly include everybody, that we don't care about your sexual preference, we don't care about your gender, your age, your ethnic or cultural background. We value everybody. And building trust with the students, the teachers, and the support staff through inclusive leadership is the only way to build successful schools. And hopefully more school districts in the future will begin to realize this. We don't all have to agree to believe in an inclusive leadership style. I don't agree with the lifestyle that a lot of teachers in my building live. It doesn't make them wrong. It just makes them different. And I think that's what we need to teach students, that it's okay to have differences. We still need to treat everybody with respect. And finally, encourage the heart. This is the one that I found the most research on. It's the one I found the most videos on. And I go back to the gentleman I researched for, I believe it was assignment 2 or maybe assignment 3, I don't remember now, Dr. Kenneth Blanchard. Excuse me. He advocated strongly for showing others that you care. True servant leadership. It means putting others first and encouraging the heart. That concept is exactly that. It encourages you to value your staff, your teachers, to put them first, to make sacrifices for the betterment of them. Give them rewards, pat them on the back, let them know you care. Reinforcement and showing you care will lead to more successful or a higher degree of success in implementing inclusive leadership. The illustration I put at the bottom of this slide, most of the illustrations in this PowerPoint are just there to reinforce things. But this is one I saw on Facebook several weeks ago. And it reminded me of a situation I was in as an employee once where the boss was like the boss in that top illustration. He led from the back. He commanded things of you. He did not show you how to do it. I'm fortunate now that my assistant principal, my athletic director, the gentleman that I refer to or go to if I have a leadership question, he's like the leader in the bottom. He shows you how to do it. He's at the front, modeling and encouraging and showing you what he wants done. And I think that's very, very important. I believe all 5 of these go hand in hand, and you can't have one without the other in inclusive leadership. There will be some challenges. I think that goes without saying that any time you change something, there will be challenges. And you have the option, like the sign there at the top shows. You can keep down the same old street, or you can take Change Boulevard. If you go with the change, it's hard. People like the status quo. We love what we know. That was one of the hardest things. I'm getting married here in a couple months. That was one of the hardest things. I'm 28 years old. I've been on my own for 6 years now. Change is hard. But I think just similar to marriage, whenever you haven't worked in the schools or in education, sometimes you have to make sacrifices. Sometimes you have to make changes for the people you care about and the people you love. And hopefully for us as future administrators, the people that we care about and the people we love will be our teachers and our support staff. We're only as good as the people that we work with. A fleet of ships only moves as fast as the slowest one. And so we need to build each other up and be willing to change the status quo. Another challenge could be that in less diverse communities, they may not value inclusion. I taught in a community my first year where a very good community, very supportive, but it wasn't a diverse community. Predominantly white, blue-collar farm families. And getting communities like that to value inclusion could be more difficult. It also takes time. You can't fire current staff just to move towards inclusion. And along those same lines, you've still got to hire people that are qualified. You can't go out and just say, well, our English teacher resigned this year, so we really need to try to find somebody that's different than the rest of our staff. You have to go out and find the person that's the best teacher, the best person for that job. And hopefully, through that process, you can find people who are diverse, who do have differences in ethnicity and culture and gender and age, and bring those people into your school district. But I think one of the biggest challenges is that at times we lose sight of the education aspect, and we focus only on bringing people in who would fit the mold of inclusive leadership. And I think that's great, but we shouldn't sacrifice the education of our kids just to do that. So I think those are 4 of the biggest challenges that we face as future administrators when implementing inclusive leadership. Here's the bibliography page, the 2 articles there at the top, and then obviously the leadership challenge, which I'll be honest was a lot easier and more enjoyable read than I anticipated it would be. This course has been great. This is my first one on my road to getting my master's, and have certainly learned a lot, and have really enjoyed this short 9-week course, or whatever, how many weeks it was. We're 9 weeks into the school year. So hope everybody has a great rest of the semester, and if you're ever in Eastern Kansas, stop by. I'd love to meet you all. Good evening.